Hello. Good evening. Thank you for your patience. Our executive session obviously ran over a little bit, and then I think everyone had a bio break, so forgive us. But if you could please stand and join me in the pledge.
The flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, God.
Okay. So we begin our evening with public comments. Recognition of visitors for any item on the agenda or for any other concern. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public. Each person wishing to speak is asked to speak into the microphone, identify themselves, and respectfully limit their comments to 3 minutes. 2 opportunities to speak are available, one early in the meeting, which will be limited to 30 minutes, and one at the end of the meeting. Each speaker may address the board only once at both the opening and closing portion of the agenda. Please remember there'll be no cross dialogue between speakers and between members of the board. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. Would anyone like to make a public comment? There's microphones right by Lofton.
Good evening. I'm here as a parent and a member of this community who believes deeply in both compassion and accountability. What I wanted to speak on tonight was the discordance amongst families and the way they are feeling right now between the seriousness of a gun threat that was made by a 6th grade student last week at Cornwall Central Middle School and the response that followed. A threat of mass violence was communicated by a student. That is not hypothetical. It is not a misunderstanding. It is not expressive speech. It was a threat. The school district's policy in the past has been 0 tolerance and a mandatory 5-day suspension. That was not done with this student. She was back in class today. The discordance erodes trust, not just between parents in the district, but amongst the children themselves. Children are perceptive. They notice when words and actions don't align. I'm just asking for transparency around the safety decisions that were made for the families that are not left filling in the blanks. We can hold compassion for a child and uphold standards that keep everyone safe. They are not competing values. They are the foundation of a functioning school district and community. I did receive a call today from Mrs. Palumbo, and Superintendent Argino graciously responded promptly. But people are left speculating, is this child IEP? Why was the absence of school policy around threats removed? My name is Angela Shapiro.
Any other comments? Ms. Shapiro, we don't like cross dialogue at this time. We take the comments and then we come back at the next meeting and address them. So I just wanted to make sure that, we weren't ignoring your comment. No, that's okay. We're not ignoring you. I just wanted you to know that that's how this portion operates. Other public comments?
Hi, good evening. This also is my first board meeting in my life, but I'm a local resident. My name is Sam Davies. I'm also a veteran. I understand that late last year, a law was passed for veterans tax exemptions. I think it's called Bill A-74. Just curious if Cornwall has any plans to do anything with that bill, adopt it, if there's been any discussion about it, just looking for information. I did reach out to the school. Somebody called me back. We've been playing phone tag maybe, but just wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Okay, now superintendent's update. Mrs. Argenio.
Hi, thank you. So January's been very busy, from incredible drama plays and winter concerts to a flash mob, even right here, a dance mob, I should say. And actually, we have Mrs. King in our audience. I'm not going to call her out, but I'm totally calling her out because she was one of our leads in this, and it was amazing. And she set up practices before school, and it was fantastic. So thank you for that. We also have had some great unified basketball happening last weekend. We hosted all county festival, over 350 of the best musicians in the county. So we are literally rocking and rolling throughout January, and February we are not slowing down. This is officially the second part of the calendar, and we are moving and grooving to the end. So one thing though that did slow us down a little bit was the weather. And I have to admit, and I've shared this before, that this is the least favorite part of my role. I never realized how stressful it is to call the weather because, meteorologists get a lot of slack, but I have to tell you, it changes very quickly. So thank you to everybody who supports that, the early morning calls. John Fink and I are on the phone, Walter Moran and I are on the phone very early in the morning, and I'm looking outside, and I'm like, I don't see anything yet, but it's supposed to be coming. So, one of my personal big things is making sure our kids are driving on the road. So I want to make sure that that's the first layer of safety, and then we go on from there. But I just want to thank everyone. As I came into this role, I was asked, probably the number one question I was asked is, are you going to sing on snow days? And that is no, because trust me, you don't want to hear me singing, and I don't think you want to wake up to me singing. But thank you to our students and staff who have been super creative. They've created some really fun social media posts to close our schools. Even the last storm was Storm Fern, and we have a teacher out with Willow Avenue who her last name is Fern, so they made a cute little clip about that. So having some fun with those things. But what's not fun is what happens on the back end. So I just want to really thank our buildings and grounds team. They have been nothing short of incredible. We had a couple safety meetings before the last storm, and just the immense dedication and seriousness about all facets that go into getting our buildings open, getting our grounds open, people taking full responsibility. If you're the head custodian in, let's say, this building, what do you need to look at? Where are the gaps? What rooms are going to be cold? What if we lose power? A list of things that they went through. And then on top of it, what if we have machines that go down? We might have a salt shortage, stuff like all these pieces that necessarily the community may not be thinking about, we may not be thinking about, but they're thinking about it. So a huge thank you to them, and also a huge thank you to our, our local people who are working on that, local transportation, sanitation, getting those sidewalks clean. I know that took days. There were some serious machines out there that were removing the snow. So thank you to them. West Point Tourists for getting their garages moving and their buses moving, and also a thank you to our town supervisor. Him and I were collaborating throughout the storm, just kind of like how some of his decisions might impact us opening up on Tuesday and so on. So it was really a true collaborative effort. And you look in other parts of the country. I was recently in North Carolina with my son on a college trip, and they had this storm over the weekend, which was significant, but they are closed down now for the week. And I'm like, we had a day and a 2-hour delay, so we're nailing it. So thank you again to everyone. We continue to get through the winter, and this is a true New York winter. So hang on. I'm optimistic that we're going to be at the end of it, but we are just in February. So thank you.
Thank you. So president's update. I just want to address, I have to say, when I attended my first board meeting, it was the weirdest feeling to come up and speak and then have no one respond to me. So and since it's both of your first meeting, I just don't want it to feel like it's just dropped and left. It's something that we as a board come back and speak about after to make sure that we have the right answers, the right facts, and we're not giving misinformation. So I want you to know it's not just left in the middle of the room, so to speak. We're listening, and we will circle back around at our next board meeting. Okay. So I want to give an update on the superintendent search. We have a candidate review meeting tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Reminder to my fellow board members to please come with your potential questions. We will be doing interviews the week of February 23rd, And as a reminder, we're going to be using the information from our community survey and the forums that were held, to inform our process. But we are getting into the home stretch of that project. Our strategic planning project will be kicking off at our next board meeting on February 9th. HYA will be here to present the plan, the next steps, and the ask of the board and the community. I also want everyone to know that PPS, People Services, is going to be doing a presentation for the board at our next executive session, which will be on Monday, February 9th. And then there'll be a board meeting presentation on February 23rd. And a reminder as well that the Capital Project Community Forum is February 4th at 7 p.m. here in the auditorium. Cafetorium. I had somebody say to me recently who no longer has kids in the district. They said, I'm really out of touch now because I don't have a child in school anymore. And so I would just say, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, if they're not with kids currently in school, this is important information. Everyone has a vote. People should be informed about, what the capital project's going to entail. So we're going to do our best to get the word out, through all the media ways that we can. But I encourage everyone to talk to your friends and neighbors, et cetera, that might not necessarily have kids in the district. So thank you. I will just make a note that our reports for January from the schools, good news from the schools, our student representatives, they don't attend 2 meetings in a month. It's a lot. And because our meeting shifted, that's what happened. But those reports are available online if you would like to see what the good news is from our schools. So now we're moving on to our consent agenda. We have items 2 through 10. Would anybody like any of those items pulled from the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull item 3, please, personnel actions.
Also, I'm sorry, we have 2 through 11. The 11th is the action related to the nurse subrate, sorry. Yeah, so that was added, so that's 2 through 11. So Jim, we're gonna pull number 3. Anyone else?
I'm going to pull number 9 and 10.
9 and 10. Okay. So the consent agenda permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate, which has already happened, and we will consider and vote on those separately, preserving the right of all board members to be heard on any issue. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following consent agenda items as submitted by the Superintendent of Schools. Items 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 11. May I have a motion to pass the consent agenda?
Moved.
Thank you, Brendan. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Christian. All in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. The motion passes. Okay. Item number 3, Jim.
Yeah, I think it's a question for clarification. Down at the bottom of after all of the appointments, it says that the superintendent has recommended adding a full-time 1 FTE teaching assistant. We made this request as a result of students' IEP needs. We typically don't add positions in the middle of the year, but obviously if we had a new student move in the district or a student got a new classification that they needed this help. I'm just looking for a little clarification there because on what that is. So Megan, Brent, John, whoever.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that, Jim. So there was a need in the middle school as a result of an IEP that warranted, unfortunately, an additional FTE. So we've traditionally put that resolution at the end of the personnel agenda.
That answers it. Thank you.
Any other discussion on number 3? Okay, may I have a motion for approving the personnel action?
So moved.
Thank you, Brendan. A second? Carl, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, personnel actions number 3 passes. Thank you. Okay, numbers 9 and 10, Christian. 9, are they related?
They're probably related, but I'm taking them separately.
Okay, so number 9.
9
Okay.
I'm pulling just for the purpose of abstaining. So,
Okay. So number 9, I have a motion to approve. I'm trying to summarize this because it's long. The resolution to approve tax set. Thank you. Sociary testing me settlement agreement between the village with the Village of Curious Joel. May I have a
So moved.
motion? Thank you, Brendan. A second. Thank you, Lofton. All in favor of the resolution to approve tax sociary settlement agreement? Show of
Aye.
hands. Opposed? Abstaining? Abstention? Thank you, Christian. The motion passes. Consent agenda item number 10, a resolution to approve intervention in tax sociary proceedings. Thomas Drohan, Waxman, Pettigrew, and Mail LLP. Christian?
so people who know what I've talked about, this has been something that I've been calling attention to for several years now, and I am very glad that we are taking some concrete action on this because of how it affects and also the equity or fairness concerns in our district. Now, there's not an outcome, but I'm glad we are taking, I think, really from the first time, serious action on this topic. And I just want to note that, and I hope that it has an outcome that is fair to all the members of our community.
Okay, number 10, be it resolved, I would like a motion for this particular action item. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Cornwall Central School District hereby authorizes Thomas Drohan, Waxman, Pettigrew, and Mail LLP to take any and all action necessary to intervene in the following proceeding commenced in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of Orange, pursuant to Article 7 of the Real Property Tax Law. Number 1, the Village of Cornwall and Hudson versus Town of Cornwall et al., index number EF 007222-2025. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education of the Cornwall Central School District hereby consents that Daniel Pettigrew appear in the above enumerated tax sociary proceedings, and that Daniel Pettigrew is hereby authorized, empowered, and directed to sign the notices of appearance to intervene. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brendan. A second? Thank you, Richard. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. Moving on to old business discussion. So the board will have a discussion and update regarding a proposed May 2026 capital project bond referendum. This was the whole reason of having this meeting today. Initially was an extra meeting on the calendar to have this very rich, thorough discussion. And then we had the snow day, so it proved very useful. But John, I'll turn it over to you.
So I'll ask the Facilities Committee members also to jump in wherever appropriate. I put in front of all the board members a packet. Luckily, we did get to give the board a really healthy and robust update at our last meeting. So we did meet as a Facilities Committee on January 21st. I believe that was a Thursday at this point. And we've arrived as a committee at some general consensus from that committee. So in front of you, you have, again, some large sheets and spreadsheets and packets. And I'm going to take you through the first proposition. The general consensus from that the Facilities Committee was to move forward with a Proposition 1, which is a tax-neutral project. The sum total of that project is approximately $44.5 million. Okay. There's scope of work scoped for all of our schools, high school, middle school, 3 elementary schools, buildings and grounds, and the district offices. Okay. Some higher level items that we need to construct a bathroom and concession stand adjacent to our tennis courts for our stadium that was mandated by New York State Ed. We have some roof replacement. We're looking to do PA replacements and clock systems in all of our schools. Because we have some issues there, fire alarm replacements as well. In the middle school, some major upgrades taking place. We're looking to have an addition placed on the building for our kitchen and cafeteria. That way we can renovate the current kitchen and cafeteria and make additional classroom space there. We are also looking to place a parent pickup and drop off in the rear of the building. So we would take the gravel road that runs along the track and football field and bring it behind the building for a new parent drop-off. There's also some paving work going on there. And then you'll see some interior drainage, and as well as the replaced PA systems. If I walk along to Cornwall Elementary School, you'll see some other items in there in terms of replace backflow preventers, additional fencing around the playroom areas. There's some pavement replacement work going on there. Converting some STEAM labs, some classrooms, and upgrading those classrooms. You'll see a red notation there. It says unsat or unsatisfactory. That was from our building condition survey, so we felt that it was appropriate to take action on that, which is addressing our chimney deterioration, as well as some of our PA work. Willow Avenue, additional parking and widen a one-way road, and we want to do kind of a softball field shift. Pavement replacement in the bus loop, some additional fencing, some roofing work, gym floor replacement, which has been needed for quite some time, unsatisfactory for some composite slab under the kitchen. Auditorium air conditioning was added to this project. That's a little bit different from the last time we met. We knew we needed to put that into this project because it is a classroom space and classes meet there regularly, so we wanted to make sure that it was air conditioned. There's some plumbing and electrical upgrades there as well. At Cornwall on Hudson Elementary, you'll see, again, some backflow preventers, and we also did auditorium air conditioning there as well. That is also a classroom space that meets regularly, and they have a number of events in there. So we felt it was important to add that into the scope of the project. That was not included the last time we provided an update for the board. There's a PA system there as well. Buildings and grounds remains. We want to put a 4-bay garage storage. That way we can get more longevity from our equipment and our machines, and our crews can work indoors instead of outdoors on any of our machines. Expand life expectancy. District offices, full window replacement. So we're not, we're becoming a little bit more efficient with our heating and cooling in that building. Replace some timber retaining walls adjacent to the masonry stairs. That was an unsatisfactory from our building condition survey as well as provide fire alarms. So again, that was a quick overview of Proposition 1. I don't know if any of the committee members want to add in any information from that tax neutral project at this point before I move on.
So John, do you want to do this like in stages, or do we want to just introduce the different propositions and then have a general discussion?
We could do, I just didn't know if anybody wanted to stop me. I can keep going on forever, unfortunately, yeah.
I know this was covered in our last meeting, but perhaps for the edification of the public, just explaining why it's tax neutral, even at this larger number than our previous one that was tax neutral, might be understanding because it's not tax neutral. And I said this at the previous meeting, but I think it bears repetition.
Sure.
And also that it might even be, since we haven't really worked out all the aid that is
Correct.
under this, that it actually might be even more fiscally beneficial than what we're currently
Correct.
discussing at this point. And I think if you could just expand on that.
Sure. So we use the term tax neutral or no additional tax burden to our taxpayers for two reasons. Number one, we have a $7.5 million capital reserve fund. So it's kind of a savings bank that the district has put aside over the past several years to help offset costs for future capital expenses. And Jim Cregan here likes to use the kind of 3-to-1 model. So, spend some money and get some more money back from New York State. And then we have additional debt that would be falling off. So Christian, you're going to steal some thunder here at the end, where we're going to have some additional money that's going to be coming our way in the future. So this project, this $44.5 million project, is likely to balloon a little bit bigger, in the tune of $50 to $60 million. But we don't know how much building aid we're going to get. So the way we are forecasting it at this point, kind of as of February, is that we have to forecast very conservatively and that we're not going to get building aid. We have to go through something called a preliminary submission process with New York State Ed. So very lengthy paperwork process where they ask for a lot of information, enrollment numbers, statistics, classrooms, things like that, current building size, and they weigh that into their factor of how much more building aid we would be eligible for. And that's a very simple way of just expanding upon that. If they determine that we're eligible for more building aid, this project can be more tax neutral, and we have more buying power to that. So kind of a simple way to look at it. Christian, I don't know if I got every point you want.
You said that's the point about why it's tax neutral, but you mentioned that it might balloon to a larger total number. And does that mean we are spending on more projects than currently what is budgeted here, or that these will be have less of a you could say local tax impact?
Correct. So out of the facilities committee meeting, the facilities committee had the consensus of Proposition 1. So I think right now it's important to go into what was Proposition 2. The facilities committee came to a consensus with moving forward with a secondary proposition, and we're calling it the classroom proposition. And you'll see that on your sheet 2. It says Proposition 2 classrooms. It would be adding classrooms to the middle school. So we call it the connection between the B and the C wings, which is classrooms and improve the flow. At Cornwall Elementary School, we're going to have an addition put on. It's called the 4 on top of 4, 4 classrooms on top of 4 classrooms. And that at Cornwall on Hudson, we're going to renovate the kitchen and cafeteria. We're going to expand that space out the back of the building and then renovate the current kind of kitchen space across the hall that would become classroom space. So the total project cost here is about $21.1 million. So potentially this scope of this Proposition 2 could go into Proposition 1 and be tax neutral. But that is all still to be worked out as we move through our time series here.
So would that depend upon the public voting on Proposition 2, or does it shift naturally because there's more space in that?
So that's going to be a decision for the committee to recommend to the full board,
Right.
and the full board to decide how we can parse this out.
So this would be decided before the referendum, and the
Correct.
propositions would be actually written and put in front of the public.
Correct. That's correct. So again, as of this time, there's some decisions that need to be made. We have a facilities committee meeting coming up again this Thursday. Wednesday is the community forum. Thursday is our meeting. So we're going to bring this back to the facilities committee. And we have a Proposition 3 that I'm going to talk about in a minute to see how the committee wants to kind of move through this and make a recommendation to the full Board of Education. Because ultimately, we're going to need, as a timeline from the Board of Education, all the propositions, however they're written out, and that plane has to be landed by March 9th. Because when we come in here on March 23rd, that has to be voted on by the Board of Education, and then it's done. So the kind of final discussion will be March 9th unless we scheduled another meeting. So between February 9th or February 2nd today and March 9th, we might want to schedule a couple facilities committee meetings, and that way March 9th, the decision's ready to go.
I think we should, just for purposes of what we're doing now, I think we should just hold the discussion that you want to have, Christian, because I want to have it too. Let's introduce Proposition 3, just sort of introduce the recommendation with the information we had at our last facilities committee meeting to the full board, and then we can have a more comprehensive.
No, I think that's the way. I didn't mean it to be as much of a tangent. I apologize.
Yeah, it's a lot. Proposition 3 came out from the committee as well. It's called the athletics proposition. And the committee felt that this warranted a further discussion with the full Board of Education to add additional fields. So we have some pricing for the high school to relocate the baseball and the softball fields and include synthetic turf. There would also be kind of a multi-sport field in the outfields of those athletic fields. The cost for that is about $14.6 million. And then we had scope of work at the middle school. There would be a new turf field and track. So replacing the current turf field and track that exists now, kind of in kind with new lighting. The cost for that would be $9.4 million. And then we also scoped project work for multi-sport athletic field, baseball, softball, soccer, lacrosse, and that would be off to the side on the other field at the middle school, all synthetic turf with some lighting. And the cost there is about $9.6 million. So an all-in cost here was $33.6 million, and the committee felt this was something that the board should discuss, because there was no consensus one way or the other. There were some leanings that maybe the field could go at the high school. There were some leanings that it could go at the middle school. How many fields? Do we do one field? Do we do two fields? I think the consensus was probably not 3 fields, but again, I think we can have that discussion here. In the next packet you have in front of you is really the pictures of everything that you have here with some price tags on it and some drawings. So you have a lot here at the middle school because there's a lot of work going on. So you'll see what we're calling affectionately as the parent drop off and pick up, as the kiss and go. It has a price tag of $5.1 million. It paves the road. It puts in parking. It creates a bus loop, a loop in the back for that to take place. You'll also see the kitchen and cafeteria addition. And then you'll see where we're renovating the current kitchen and cafeteria. Then placed on this diagram is what does it look like if we redid the track and the turf, and then the multi-sport athletic field that goes alongside that as well. And then the last piece you'll see is the classroom addition connecting the B and C wings, all the way in the kind of top right-hand side of the picture. On the next page, you'll see kind of a little diagram of what it looks like for the cafeteria addition at Cornwall on Hudson. Okay, that kind of pop out. What we're not showing is the renovation of the classroom space that would occur inside. For Cornwall Elementary, you'll see where we're proposing the classroom addition to come out the kind of right-hand side of that building, or the lower side of that building. That would be 4 classrooms on 4 classrooms with a stairwell in it. I think some janitorial space, a vestibule. And then the last one is, what does the field space look like at the high school? This was one drawing that they had. Square footage wise, if we were to move this around and maybe put the softball field positioned differently or the baseball field positioned differently, it would probably be the same cost. But this was just one kind of concept that we had to bring forward to the board. And then the last packet here was our debt service schedule. And I shared this the last time, and this is a different debt service schedule. So this takes into account these propositions as I just explained to you: Proposition 1, Proposition 2, Proposition 3. So I'll put my glasses on because I can't read it, even though it's on big placemat paper. You'll see 4 blue boxes. The first blue box on the left-hand side is our current debt service schedule. These are debt payments that we're currently paying to NYPA for an energy project that we did, the project that built the high school. And then you'll see in there in column 5 is where our building aid kicks in for the current 22 project, 2022 capital project that's going to be wrapping up next summer. And then we start catching aid on that. In the second blue box, you're going to see what that Proposition 1 looks like at $44.5 million. And then column 12 is that tax impact on assessed value at $100,000. And you're seeing negative balances with the exception of really one line. And those negative balances tell us that we are below tax neutral. So there's room in that project to add more money. If I move over to the third blue box, it actually says it's Propositions 1 and 2. It's an additional $21.1 million. And then you're seeing the impact of Proposition 1 and 2 on assessed value in column 18. And you're seeing an impact ranging from roughly $63, and then we have one outlier at $100, but 63 and to a low of 49. And that includes Proposition 1 and 2. You'll see at the top of that box up there. That's assuming no aid again on the additional classrooms, because again, we're assuming worst case scenario in this. And then if you move over to the last blue box on the right-hand side, you'll see Proposition 1, 2, and 3, $33.6 million. It's now adding in, if we were to do the fields, all the fields, and you're looking at the tax impact over $100,000 assessed value at ranging from $191 roughly to $230 $50 on assessed value, $100,000 assessed value. So we have a broad range kind of coming out here at this point based on the information that we were working with and moved to fiscal advisors. So I know I've said a mouthful. I apologize.
John, can you remind me, columns 18 and 24, those numbers, tax impact on $100,000 value, is that compounded? So every year we're adding 60 plus 60 plus 60, or that's what the anticipated is for that year?
That's what it is for that year, 6375 for 1 year at $100,000. So if
Right.
you have $300,000, you're going to multiply.
180, right?
Correct.
But the next year, is it $60 on top of that increase I had the previous year, or is it the anticipated is just going to be six? That's what I'm paying back on that loan
Yes,
that year.
correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
While we're on this chart, because there are so many questions beyond this chart, you mentioned very quickly the debt service schedule for the 2022 capital project.
Correct.
And I don't think you said this, but wrapping in the high school project from 99 or wherever. Just help me understand like where
Yep.
those numbers are in each column.
Yep. So you're seeing, hold it up for myself.
So column 5 was blank at our last facilities meeting,
Correct.
right? And that's the one that got filled in, and that's what changes the math from
Correct.
our last meeting.
Yes.
And column 5 is the estimated aid for the 2022 capital project. And we don't have that finalized because that hasn't been closed out yet, but since most of the work has been done, it's a very educated guess as to what that number is going to be. It's not exact, but it should be pretty accurate.
It is pretty accurate. We asked fiscal advisors to take a look at that. We pulled what our job numbers and said, okay, these are the values of our job numbers. The last piece that has to be accomplished here is final cost reports. So now we take into account all of our contracts, all the work that was done, all the money that was paid out, and then we file that with New York State. Once those final cost reports are filed, that's when our building aid will then start kicking in. So we're going to try and look to get those filed before June 30th, most of them. So to answer your question,
So that's 22.
that's
the
22, the money coming back in. And in column 2, you're seeing the actual bonds and NIPA payments. And you're seeing that year in 2030 where they stop in column 2. And that's the big shift, is that our outstanding debt payments actually stop. And so we begin to take on more debt in order to pay for that. So we're replacing that hole.
And is everything in column 2 the high school coming off, or is that a combination of things?
It's a combination. That's the NIPA loan as well, which ends at the same time.
It's mostly the high school.
Correct.
I think that NIPA project was like a power project to get fluorescent, go to some LED
Much
lights or
smaller
something.
than the high school project.
Yeah. The majority of that money is the high school.
So
I
that's
think the timing is just coincidental
that they
the
aligned.
debt rolls off in the exact same year for both
Yeah.
of them.
So then that's now it's all falling into place. So with that, column 2 ending in 2030, then we jump over to column 6. That's why we're basically leaping forward about $3.2 million a year into the negative. Why does the negative only last till 2033 in column 6? Because then it goes starting 2034. It's kind of negligible, but $12,000, $26,000.
That's a question I'd have to ask for fiscal advisors, actually.
Tell them that I asked that question.
What's that?
That's fine.
Yeah, I just want to also point out, you're seeing on here, column 4, estimated series 2026 DASNY. That's because we're going to bond for the current capital project. So by June 30th, we'll be bonded for the current 22 capital project. So those are the payments that will begin for that. And then the estimated 5 is the aid payments that we'll get back for it.
If you look at it, Brendan, the bond, the high school and the NIPA bond gets paid off in 2030, but it looks like there's still building aid coming through all the way to 2040. So I think that explains the discrepancy that you're seeing in 6.
Right, that's the same
I
drop
don't know
off.
why that doesn't matter, probably because the same issue with the building aid in column 5, you're seeing that expected to start in 2027.
Yeah.
for something we voted on in 2022,
Probably going to be a 3-year gap in all these
there's going to
things.
be a
Or
lag,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm sure the same issue happened. They built the high school, did bond anticipation notes, didn't bond it until it was complete. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
John, do these numbers, so box 3 and 4, for instance, and we have to get into the nitty gritty, but these estimates include all anticipated aid, all anticipated, when I was at the meeting, they were talking about how some of it's aidable, some of it they're not sure. Does this include all of what's anticipated, or is there hope for some more?
It's all inclusive of the spreadsheets here,
Okay.
based on our conservative approach.
Okay.
Right? So we can, theoretically, we would receive aid on a classroom, theoretically, but we don't want to rely on that until we know for sure.
Okay.
New York State Ed will tell us that in our meetings with that. They won't give you an answer over the phone, so to speak.
Right, okay.
So that is why we're saying, okay, we're not going to project aid at this or the maximum aid at this because we're concerned that we may not get maximum aid, right? We can't go out and tell the public, oh,
Right.
we're going to get 75% aid
We're
on
not
this,
overselling it.
but we're only going to get 57%.
Got it.
So yes, that it's represented on here, and you'll see that kind of
Yeah.
project aidability 58.7%,
Right.
project aidability 0%. Okay.
So it could be better.
It will likely be better, but again, I think the stance we'll have to take as a board, as the committee, this is what we have to put out for now.
And I think that's the right thing to do because we don't want to overpromise, but I just wanted to understand there's the possibility.
So that, Christine, on we're at column 7 through 13, which assumes you do a Proposition 1 in the amount of $44.5 million. That, to John's point, it says the aidability there's 58.7. I think that number's not really a conservative estimate. I mean, I think that's what we think it's going to be, right?
Yeah, they're pretty.
And
they
that's
feel pretty-
because some of the projects are not aidable. So we don't get that full 73% or 72%, whatever our number is. It's only 58. For the second box that says Proposition 1 and 2, so that Proposition 2 additional amount of 21,000, and that's what we call the classroom piece of this that has connect the B and C wings at the middle school, the 4/4 at Lee Road, and renovate the cafeteria to open up a classroom at COH. That's got an aidability of 0, and that number will probably improve. My question for you, as we get into the nitty gritty, you said we need to decide the propositions by March 9th. You have made a submission to State Ed to see what would be aidable. Will we have that answer by March 9th?
We won't. We won't have that. The process takes much longer. We won't have that done before the vote, fortunately.
Okay.
So we're going to have to essentially package a capital project. Well, first we have to make a decision as a board what we want to put in front of the public, and then we have to go in front of the public able to say with confidence Proposition 1 would be tax neutral.
Correct.
But Proposition 2, hypothetically, might be tax neutral. So they're casting a vote on, I should be prepared to pay for this out of my taxes, but I might find something under the Christmas tree further down the road.
Yeah, and again, I think we're comfortable saying that there will be some aid, but we just don't know how much.
It'll be less than, so I'm almost seeing the slide deck come together, tax impact, less than or equal to, fill in the number.
That would, I mean, very simply, yeah, but we'd love to say, okay, yeah, we're going to get 75% aid, but there's no way we could say that, right?
So just
Confidently,
to
or
spend
50%.
spend a little more time on the process and the timeline for the preliminaries. So we've started the preliminary submission process, and then that's going to go through Albany. What rough timeline do we have? And just for our own understanding, what are the likely range of outcomes? Is it totally unpredictable, or do we have any past precedent for these types of projects where we say this is probably where we can fall into? Not that we would take that kind of messaging to the public because it's so uncertain, but as far as our own decision making.
Yeah, I think it depends on, number one, are we comfortable with the scope that we have in front of us here? Is that what you want to move forward with? And because that's the scope that we have to send in for the submission process. They need to know, what's your scope? So we've done some of this work with them already. We have not put it on into paper for them at this point. So for them to, they wouldn't even come close to saying, can we get a number? No, they're not going to give you a number because they want everything in front of them. And I think it's too risky for them. So I think the architects and engineers have had better experience. So they might be able to say, okay, yeah, in the facilities committee, we can ask Jim and Ingrid to weigh in a little bit more on that. I think John and Kevin from Triton would also be able to say that a little bit more comfortably as well. But until we know, we don't know,
So if I could,
which is frustrating.
did you have a line of questioning or?
I have so many that I don't want to occupy the whole meeting. So go ahead.
I just maybe want to kind of recap for the board members who aren't on the facilities committee. I think John recapped it. I want to recap it again for the other board members not on the committee, as well as the public here tonight and watching on the stream. Just sort of where we left it at the last board meeting, the change we've seen since then, and kind of how that puts us moving forward. So, really just to recap, there's 3 sheets in front of you. There is a Proposition 1 in the amount of $44.5 million, which will be tax neutral based upon 2 factors. One, spending the approximately $7.5 million we have in the current capital reserves in combination with the debt service falling off that paid for the high school that was opened in 2004. So combining those 2 factors together, at our last meeting, we said, okay, this is Proposition 1. It's a consensus of this committee to recommend this to the full board as a revenue neutral project. We then recommended, the committee recommends to the full board to take a Proposition 2, which is all of the 3 different classroom projects at the middle school, Lee Road, and the smaller project at COH. That's in the amount of $21 million, and that would not be revenue neutral. So that would see a tax increase for taxpayers. What's changed since our committee meeting is the estimated bond payments for the 2022 capital project were added in. So some of that Proposition 2 could be added into Proposition 1 and still remain tax neutral. So I think a question I'll pose to you, John, to bring back to the facilities committee on Thursday is, okay, you've got negative numbers in column 12 here, your tax increase of Proposition 1 now. When do we get to 0? What's the knife's edge of that 21 million? Is it 5, 10, 15? Which is just, the math there. So I would recommend, I would guess we as a committee on Thursday will recommend pulling some of that project into an expanded Proposition 1.
But it doesn't look like we'll know by May how much of that will actually.
But even if you assume 0 aidability, by fixing that column 5, which was not yet populated in this sheet in our last meeting, there's still some headroom to get to.
Okay, I was
neutral.
assuming that what we had in front of us was inclusive of that, but so that $44 million number would go north based solely on the aidability that we have now been able to predict.
Yeah, if you look at column 12, those numbers are negative. So we need to get column 12 to be 0.
But the third box, column 18, it's combining 1 and 2.
Yep.
And that's taking into account the negative, the benefits we'll have, yeah?
So so that's another way to look at it.
Okay.
So to look at it that way, the number there is 21.1 million. What number do you put in place of 21 that's lower than 21.1 million that takes that number in column 18 to 0?
Mm-hmm.
Is it 5 million? Is it 10 million?
So what could we include
Right.
I think what people are asking for is a rough estimate, understanding the fact that there are no precise numbers. Are we talking the whole amount, part of the amount? Yeah, I think
Well,
that's
I think
what
that's
we're-
that's a number we could just, if I had access to the spreadsheet, you could get that number fairly quickly. I think we can have that number by Thursday, right?
Sure, but
The mathematical answer.
correct. But some of this then will circle right back to what's the scope of the work that you want, and we'll tell you if it's aidable or not. That
So we
makes
should have
sense?
that, we should go back to the 1, 2, and 3 and look at those projects.
And then that's where how we've worked through this whole process, right? We're trying to figure out what's the scope, and then we figure out what's our tax impact. So as we're trying to kind of do both things at once, we're at a point now where, okay, you have a fair question. How much more can go into that 44 million tax neutral project to go make that balance zero? But what is that scope of the work? Is that scope of the work all aidable project work at what we're assuming is 57%?
So I would say it's two pieces of good news. One,
This is all very good news.
Right.
It's just
so, yeah, so I mean, I would say one argument is since we're not going to know the aid percentage, we will get our advisors to give us their best guesses.
Yep.
Since we're not going to know that until we have to go, the conservative approach would be assume 0% aidable for Proposition 2. If you assume 0% aidable,
Yep.
what dollar figure can you work into Proposition 1?
Yep.
So, where we left it as a facilities committee to recommend to the full board was to recommend Proposition 1, to recommend Proposition 2 at 21.1 million, for the voters to decide as a second proposition saying this is going to increase your taxes. And then we said we also would recommend a Proposition 3. Now this year has Proposition 3 at 33 million. We did not want to recommend all three fields, which are laid out in the papers in front of you. We said that we would recommend one of those three, I think was the general feeling of the group. And it was still a little up in the air, whether that be the middle school, the current football field at the middle school, to replace that track and replace that field with a turf field, which could be for football, soccer, lacrosse as well, I believe, or to do additional turf fields at the high school, which would cover baseball and softball. So I think the committee was wavering on which of those two, but to pick one of those two. So that's where we left it at the last committee to recommend to the full board. Amy?
I just have a question on the logistics of the vote. So say if we leave it at 3, just like it is right now, do we say, do you approve 1, do you approve 2, do you approve 3? Or do we say pick one?
So usually the way, so we can structure it any way we want. But I think the way that typically is that 2 doesn't pass unless 1 passes, and 3 doesn't pass unless 1 and 2 passes. So there's kind of a cascade in terms of the order they're presented. And I think that was at least the discussion in the facilities committee as far as structuring the proposition.
We
We
didn't
could
dig-
write it a different way, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure why we necessarily want to.
We didn't have a robust discussion about that, but I think a quick straw poll was, you vote on 1, you vote on 2, you vote on 3, but you cannot pass 2 without 1, you cannot pass 3 without 1 and 2.
Yeah, I use the language of daisy chain. You're familiar with daisy chain? It's plugging extension cords into extension cords to make it all work, right? So if that's the approach, or you could do the approach of all individual, right? So do you want to vote in the fields, but not a $44 million tax neutral project, right? So it's up to the purview of the board. I just want to circle back to, this is all good news. We're in a good news setting, but I think it's a little bit complicated, and our timeline is actually still in place. So February 9th, next week, we will do a secret determination. Okay, the board. What are we impacting in our purview, and who's going to be lead agency? That will be the board. So we are on pace for that February 9th. What we still can work on is scope and where this lies in terms of tax impact over the next month. So I guess I wanted to kind of reiterate that yes, we came out of the facilities committee with a recommendation for Proposition 1, Proposition 2, and help us with Proposition 3. But now we have a little bit more buying power. So how do we want to break that out now? So Christian, I'm sorry.
I just want to get a process check if I could. What are we, facilities committee, what do you need us as a board to come back with tonight for you?
You just stole what I was going to say. No, I mean, what I would love to see, and I welcome anybody else in facilities to jump in, I would love to see, are there any questions on Proposition 1, 2, or 3 from the folks who are not in the facilities committee who haven't looked at each line item? If you have them in front of you, are there anything that you see there that you think you have questions about or should not be included, or does everybody kind of okay with this as it's presented? And I think the discussion we'll have Thursday is, can we pull some of Proposition 2 into Proposition 1 and still be tax neutral? And I think that's the discussion we'll have, factoring in both the math of this spreadsheet as well as the best guesses of our build and design teams of those projects and what percentage they would be aidable.
So
I think the board here, also coming out of that facilities committee, was some direction about the fields, because I think the committee was general consensus. Prop 1 and Prop 2 go, but we want some indicator from the board as a whole. What are your feelings about Proposition 3 and the field decisions there?
I know Christian has something he wants to say, and then I thought we could kind of go around and just individually, if you have a question, a comment, you want to comment on the fields, kind of give everyone a chance to react.
So two things. I think we are maybe obsessing too much on the aspect of tax neutrality. We don't know exactly what that number is, and I think our discussion should be not so much about whether it doesn't cost us $1 extra, but whether it's worth it. And it's like when you buy a house and they say, well, you have this budget up to this number, and you can buy any house under this number because the bank will approve you for that. And so then you decide to spend all of it. And generally what happens is you buy too much house because you feel like you're without a budget. And I think instead of talking about, if it's going to be tax neutral or a little bit not tax neutral, I think that's letting the marketing drive the decision about what we should build and not build, in the sense like what is the priority of different things. And I think we don't know the number exactly, and perhaps a better way to talk about it is, are these the things we want to prioritize? So that's, I think, one way, and I think we're maybe getting too caught up in that because it's good news, and if we have maybe it's a little bit not tax neutral, it's not going to be a lot. And the point is, if it's a project that's worth it, I think that our community will support a little bit of a tax increase, given that most of it is covered by all the things discussed before. My question from earlier, just because we were talking about the fiscal matters, and I know the answer to this, but I think I'm going to hypothetically put myself in the position of a community member who says, we spent all this money for the high school, right? And now shouldn't we get a windfall from like all this debt falling off, and that should lower our taxes? I think I know the answer to this, which is, how does that impact our tax cap on our program going forward, and why would it be actually advantageous not to take that windfall now? And if you could just maybe, John, address that.
Yep.
And why it's actually in our interest to make sure that we do use that fiscal space from the debt that's falling off, rather than just returning that to as a tax levy windfall to the community.
Yeah, the tax cap is structured. We hear about the 2% tax cap, right? The way that is structured is New York State makes it permissible and wants you to do improvements on your school buildings, wants you to do upgrades or additions as you see fit, and local control is necessary. So once you have some debt, you want to replace that debt. If you were to not replace that debt, you could be in the position where in a couple of years, your tax cap goes negative, and you're putting out to your community that you have to vote on a tax increase of a 0 and get a 60% supermajority. So you're fighting for.
Okay, can I restate? And that means just to pass our annual budget, we would need a supermajority just to pass even a slight budget,
increase.
which is likely to happen because there are drivers that are going to make the budget at least slightly larger year over year. And that means instead of just getting 50%, we would probably putting in jeopardy our core program on annual budgets and making it more difficult to pass in the future if we don't take advantage of this debt that's falling off.
Yeah. And we're heavily reliant, obviously, on our tax levy, and the components of which that drive the tax levy is debt service and your debt payments and then your improvements. And if should that fall off, then you're in that position where you are looking for a vote just to pass a basic budget vote with maybe a very small tax levy increase. You would need a 60% supermajority. It is possible.
Can I follow up on that? Because I think this is such an important point, and the understanding of this is central to why you should not just let money fall off the table. So to put we've been talking about the ideas. Now let's put a plug real numbers into that. Because I think that the part that people don't quite understand is when the tax levy goes down, why does that mean a negative tax cap? So let's say you're at $94 million for your operating budget, and what is it, $3.2 million comes off, so I guess we would go down to 91, right? Okay. Tell me why that number going down $3 million, what effect does that have on your tax cap? So if you're at 94 and you can raise it 2% rough, obviously.
Your 2% on your levy
Yes.
could be zero.
But why is that? I understand that that's the outcome, but people are going to say, I don't, that doesn't compute, because you're at 94, so your tax levy, well, last year our tax levy was what, 50, 52, something like that.
53 something, yeah.
Yeah, you would know. So, but why does the tax cap become negative or zero?
You have allowable exclusions that factor into your tax cap. So kind of on the back end of your calculation. So your debt service is one of the biggest drivers of that tax cap. When we do transfer to capital projects, that is also a driver for our tax cap. So if we were to allow that large $3 million, it's a large chunk to fall off, your exclusion changes drastically, and therefore your cap then goes down. It's the best way I can kind of describe it without.
I'm seeing it. So another way of looking at it is if you've got an equation, right? And the result of that the equation has many variables in it. At the end of that equation is your tax cap, which should result in 2%, 2.5%. This is why it changes each year. It's not 2%. People think it's a 2% written, in stone, but it's the result of a very complicated formula. If you remove certain variables from that formula or turn those variables to zero, it's going to have a direct impact on what the output is. And it's going to turn it from 2.5, 2.7 to zero, or maybe negative 0.5 or something like that.
So I think the simplest way is if you want to look up the tax cap formula, I'm sure New York State Education Department gives you the full calculation. But the basic thrust of the formula is you have a 2% base number, which is basically an inflation target, which is prices increase roughly 2%, and therefore you're allowing it to grow by that. And then you have incentives in the system that encourage you to reinvest. And when you take on certain things, it can either be higher or lower. So I know in my own district, it was below 2. We did 2.75 last year on our tax levy. Other districts to do even 2 would have had to have a supermajority because of what they've done in their past decisions. So that's why sometimes it can be more than 2 because you've taken on some of these things and therefore you have, let's say, a higher number that you can work under a 50% rule, or you can even go a lower number and as we're saying, if we let it fall off completely, we might even have a negative one, as you were saying, which means any tax levy would require 60%.
Correct. So you have districts that have a 6% levy cap. So they can go up to 6.28. Are they going that high? They may need to, or they may not to. They may not need to, but they only need the 50% majority to go there. Again, if we were to fall below this, and I think just part of that calculation process. The other part of that calculation process is our enrollment, and New York State assigns us some values as well. So we just get assigned values, and we plug and go in order to create that.
So the bottom line is that we should reinvest and not take the windfall necessarily, because that puts us in a riskier position long term.
Down the road, you're risking
Yeah.
a lot.
Okay.
Maybe not even long term. I mean, you might
Short
be
term, but
2-3
just
years.
there is
it's-
value in looking at it on paper, like, oh, why don't we just take that money and run? But that doesn't behoove us in the long run or short run, for that matter.
You would survive for a little while on reserves.
Right.
You would survive a couple of years, and then that's it.
But there's no real value add.
No,
for doing
then
that.
you've exposed yourself, so you have no protection whatsoever should something happen.
And by the way, our buildings are continuing to age, and
Correct.
we're not taking care of them.
And by the way, so and this will come up at the forum on Wednesday. But just so we're talking right now about questions that come up and arming ourselves just with our own understanding, and then hopefully even explanations. But one of the questions that comes up often, and that has come up every time we've put up a capital project successfully and unsuccessfully, is you shouldn't have to do capital projects because you should be paying for these kinds of improvements out of your operating budget. To John's point, the state has arranged these financial incentives to encourage you to do exactly what we are doing, to not pay for them out of your operating budget, which is maxed out for programming for the most part, and instead they give you these tools that you can use to invest in your capital plan at extraordinary value. So it would be foolish, actually.
You couldn't do it in your operating budget. You couldn't.
Even if you tried to, it would be foolish, and you wouldn't succeed.
You would fail.
Yeah.
You're destined to fail.
Just to build on that point, Brendan, it's not just that funding, but you can't have that effect of doing tens of millions of dollars of work if you try and piece it out every year. You have to have these big projects to get the construction managers and the construction firms, and just to manage all of that work, it's got to be something that's done, on a project once every 5 years or 10 years or whatever the case may be. You couldn't tackle some of these projects piecemeal year by year.
So for the sake of the next phase of this discussion, if I heard correctly, Proposition 1 and 2, the facility committee essentially agreed upon, and I want to give everyone a chance to ask questions and talk. But could you give us a recap of Proposition 3, where where it landed, and what you want the rest of the board to consider, and what we should be asking?
Yeah, so the consensus of the committee was to recommend to the full board Proposition 1 and 2, as stated on this paper. And to go back to a point Christian made a little bit ago, he said, hey, we're talking about what's our budget, and do you spend up to the budget, and are these projects worthy? And I don't think you were trying to say that these are unworthy, but I just want to reiterate, I think you were speaking in kind of a hypothetical.
So Jim, as we've said many times, maybe not publicly, our list is longer than this budget.
Right.
We have a long list of worthy projects.
So
we're talking about priorities, about what goes first in this line is really the discussion, as opposed to, as you know, I have some disagreements about the relative priorities of different things that are included. And I guess my point is we're talking a lot about, do we have another $1 million, $2 million here? And I think that kind of leads us into the wrong discussion. And I was trying to encourage us to talk more about why we want these things rather than just talking about the price tag part of it.
And that is the way that I took it. I just wanted to reiterate for the public's understanding, because I think your comment could be taken one of two ways, and I took it the way you intended it. The committee strongly feels that all of these projects are worthy. Most of these projects have been vetted, over the course of years, really since even going back to before the 2022 bond, going back to 2021 and that whole process. So to Christian's point, these projects have all been vetted. The committee agrees in them. Some differences of, relative rank, of course, when you're dealing with a list this long, but these are all worthy projects, and there are more than are on this list. But the consensus of the committee was to recommend Project 1 and 2 as written here. I think with some of the discussion earlier, there may be an opportunity to move some of 2 into 1. We'll have that discussion as a committee on Thursday. Project 3, as it's presented, lists 3 different athletics fields at $33 million. I think we eliminated what I'll call the multi-sport field here at the middle school, which combines baseball and football, soccer, lacrosse. It's on here. We just left all 3 available options on there. We didn't come to a final consensus there, but I think the feeling was that we would pick one of these 3. And the 2 leading contenders for that were the middle school, replacing what is the current football field of the middle school with a multi-sport field surrounded by a new track. That would leave the existing bleachers and press box there, but would give a new playing surface, or the fields that are drawn out here at the high school. So I don't think that we made a final decision between those 2 projects, so I certainly welcome comments from the board. And I hope that, that you have had a chance to discuss that more with Megan and Walter and Jason Simo. Jason couldn't make our last facilities meeting. Hopefully he can make it on Thursday. Jason recommended, when I tried to pin him down to pick one, he said you should do both. So I will try to pin him down again Thursday, probably unsuccessfully. But perhaps you guys could discuss offline and see there. So
I'm curious what the impetus was not to do both. Why do you feel like we have to pick one or the other? Not you specifically, but the committee.
Cost.
I mean,
Cost
But the
and
cost that
public
we saw-
and perception too, of just, we did a very large athletic facility last time, and if we were to go back to the public and ask for, $24 million or whatever, $20 million in fields, it was. I think the consensus was that would just be too tall of an ask.
I don't want to get into the nitty gritty again, but I'm going to ask the question. The sheet with the costs does include all the fields. Yes? Okay.
Yeah, and that's just
That's okay, I just wanted to know.
So that's what we started our meeting with, that sheet.
Yeah.
Because those were the meeting before we had discussed fields, and having a new construction management firm, they sat down with the Tetra Tech, with the architects,
Yeah.
and those were the 3 options that were presented to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had further discussion, and we narrowed it down and said
that's great.
we would pick one of these 3.
Yeah. I just wanted to
so-
see the big picture before.
Tim, if I could just characterize what my memory of the discussion was, is that no one thought 3 fields was doable, especially because at that time, because we weren't talking about this extra space, we were already asking for around $21 million for the classrooms, and then lumping another 20+ million on top of that is not tax neutral. Right, so we're talking about $53 million that at the time of the discussion was all not tax neutral. Does that make sense? So that we're talking about. So the point was, though, where I think there was a difference of opinion is, okay, we're not doing 3. I think most people were for 1. There were a few people for 2, but there was no consensus on which of these 3 doors do we want to. For the people who wanted to have a field, it went back and forth of whether middle school field, high school field, and people had different ones about which one are you going to put first if you're only doing 1. And I think what we wanted from the board as a whole is to hear about what they thought their priorities were, and maybe kind of recapitulate the arguments that were made about why some people thought the middle school field was a priority, the high school field, or the second middle school field. And I think that's maybe what we want to discuss.
I think that's a very fair recap, and I'll just add that I think that the what's listed on here as the multi-sport athletic field in the middle school was, nobody voted for that option. When they said the middle school, they voted for the turf and track option.
Yes, my memory was that we had a high school principal advocating for the middle school field and a middle school principal advocating for the high school field. And we were some with laughter because some other people were in that room with us. And I think the point about it is that there are arguments to be made for both ways, and perhaps, in a sense, maybe replaying those arguments for the people who are not there, and also gathering what their thoughts might be on what the merits of, if you're just doing 1, why would you do 1 before the other? And I think it's what we're saying is that I think it seemed to me, my memory was really it was 1 field, in addition to the classrooms, or one of these three options, and maybe two, but that
Yeah.
seemed to be a stretch for a lot of people, my memory in the room. And then that's where it led to
Agreed.
which door are we opening?
Agreed.
Okay, so for this, I'm not rushing us, but for the sake of time, I want to
Yeah,
just
please.
get to a point here. So in general, I think there aren't questions about Proposition 1, because that's essentially what we discussed in depth the last time. And Proposition 2, I mean, we spoke in detail about what the tax impact might be, but Proposition 1 and 2 are there questions or discussion, concerns about those, things that anyone wants to bring up?
I would
Okay.
just
So-
make sure everybody understands one of the next steps is that we will get a better understanding from our financial advisors how much of that could be absorbed into a
Yeah.
Proposition 1, but that's probably the
But
next.
the content of what's in
Yeah.
there is what I think we're talking about
But
now.
just so that point, that might be our next step on that.
Yeah, I wasn't defining next steps.
Yeah,
I just
okay,
wanted to
yeah.
I just wanted to give everyone a chance to react to what was on this page, and if there was anything else to add or question before we
So-
move on to the field discussion.
Yeah.
I would just add one thing, because I was a dissenting voice on this, and I'll just lay out what I suggested in the Facilities Committee meeting, which is, to me, the priority of the drop-off was not as high, and it really should not be in the first tranche. It should probably be in the second tranche. And I advocated for moving at least some of the classrooms into the first tranche to increase the probability that it would be passed. I remain unconvinced, although I think I was a solitary voice on this in the facilities discussion, which is that I have serious skepticism about the claims about the safety improvement that's going to occur from this project. And I think if you look at what another district, so my point is, I would advocate, especially if we have more room, in a sense, moving one up in the queue and moving that back into the second group. And I think the point is that there's more of a need for the classroom space than there is for the drop-off. Now, if we pass both, or if there's more space, then there's no trade-off. But that would be the way that I would structure this. But that's going to be a larger discussion, and I think our time tonight is better if we discuss the field, because I think that's the bigger question and dispute, and I think there is at least, I will hold my dissent, and let's discuss the field.
Thank you. I think we can revisit that once we have a tighter look at the numbers and we think we know what some of that might look like. We can revisit that if anyone else would like to talk about that in terms of what stays and what moves, to Jim's point earlier.
So, yeah, if I could recommend, I think you were right to say, hey, and really, it's Jamie and Lofton and Carl, because the rest of you, well, I guess you weren't at our last facilities committee meeting, but Christine, but are you okay with 1 and 2 as it exists, knowing that some of 2 may go into 1, pending future discussion? And I think really for tonight, I think just saying, are you okay with a Proposition 3 that is one of these athletic fields, or make the case that you would like to see 2 athletic fields, and let the committee go back and make a less wishy-washy recommendation, but maybe just kind of get the consensus tonight of, yes, we're okay with approving 1 or 2 fields to be put out as a Proposition 3.
Would you like the board's opinion on what field it should be?
If they have a strong one, I'm happy to take it. If they don't, I'm happy to have them say, committee, tell me.
Okay. All right. Lofton, do you mind if we start with you? Just what do you think about the fields, 1, 2, 3?
I'm comfortable with 1 and 2, and I don't know enough about the needs with the fields to be able to make a decision. So committee, tell me.
Fair enough. Carl?
I'm all in favor of projects 1 and 2. And as far as ball fields, I don't know.
You look for the committee to give a
Oh.
recommendation?
What's that?
You'll look for the committee to make a recommendation,
Yeah,
a more formal
absolutely.
recommendation?
Yep.
Okay. Richard?
I'm on the committee, so
Forgot.
waiting for everybody else.
Brendan's on the committee. I was just going to talk. Jamie?
Fine. I'm just going to reiterate Prop 1 and 2 sounds great. 3, I leave it to you guys and to the schools to duke it out, and then to voters to vote on it. I think it sounds great, but I have no idea which is needed more.
All the above. I would just put my 2 cents in that I would ask that you really look at the high school. It feels like there's some inequity there with really, with regards to the fields, like the football field being brand new, the track there being brand new, but then baseball and soccer, the other fields, they'd have to wait another however long to get those redone. And so I would just ask the committee to really evaluate that and the impact that could have on the culture, the community, et cetera.
So the only, I think that's a great point. I'll just say that soccer, though, does compete on the new field. So football, soccer, lacrosse all do their games or matches
On the new field.
On that field.
So the only thing would be the baseball field.
Baseball and softball. Now, look, it would also, I don't know, I don't have a high school athlete, so I don't know the practice schedules, but I'm sure between a junior varsity and a varsity for football, soccer, both boys and girls, so that's 6 teams right there. Plus, I think there's freshman football, so you've got 7 teams. I'm sure all want to practice on that. So I'm sure that they would welcome if you even to throw out the argument of, okay, you're going to play all of your games here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they would still welcome additional area to have practices.
And I know there's a lot of people in the community who would the middle school field would serve the community, but when it's like our students and our school sponsored sports, I feel like we really have to look at the high school. That's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, and the middle school would also give you modified sports and would give you, you could have competitions on that field. You could have varsity or junior varsity competitions at the middle school. If you need a double schedule, boys soccer's playing here, girls soccer's playing there, varsity's here, JV's there. There's lots of different options. But yes,
But neither cover baseball, softball.
Correct.
Okay. John.
Okay. Sounds like this is wrapping up. And so I'm going to throw a fly into the ointment, and I apologize, but I think it's important to just bring up because the last recommendation or consensus, I should say, from the facilities committee was the energy performance contract. Okay. Where we last left that walking out of that meeting was kind of discontinue the work moving forward for the energy performance contract. And the committee asked that Walter and I sit down and kind of look at some of the work that was included in those EPCs to see if there's anything that's of priority that we think should go into the current capital project as proposed. So I just kind of want some consensus from the board if we're going to discontinue that work, because there's work taking place behind the scenes that we would stop and refocus attention and energy.
So let me address that, because I think of the members of the committee, I was the most in favor of the energy performance contract. If I was the only decision maker in here, I would put the energy performance contract ahead of the fields and not do the fields. That was not the consensus in the room. But the reason why, and people should know that we can do the energy performance contract without a public vote. If we do it through a public vote, we improve or we get our full aid. I'm going to be careful how I say this, but the point is that there is an advantage if we do put it to a vote and it's approved in a vote. But I think the reason why I think maybe we want to suspend at least investigating that is that we put a lot on our plate. And I think the point about it is it's a very good idea. Personally, I would prioritize it among some of the other things that we put on in the first and second proposition. But I think that this gets to the point where the total dollar number increases, and I don't think that's as important. But I think it's confusing about what this capital project is. So the capital project becomes an energy efficiency, athletic fields, classroom space, drop-off, kitchen, and you get this kind of like kitchen sink type of capital project, which given the time between now and the vote is not advantageous to any of those priorities, And I think the point about it is that we have a means to revisit that that doesn't go through the public referendum or public proposition process. And so I think the priority right now, and I'm saying this as an advocate for the EPC, is to focus on the other things that have the consensus and do those right instead of trying to do 5 things and, halfway do a few things well, I think would be my advice for how to approach this at this point.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just want to add to that because I agree with that. And, I think that whenever we've spoken to leaders from other districts for a variety of reasons, whether we're, asking them about, we've talked to them in facilities committee, those that have done successful projects, superintendents from other districts that have done successful projects. The theme that always comes out is there has to be a story around the project. Like, what are you, and I only mention this now because Christian kind of just brought it up. Like, you don't want it to be this hodgepodge of different things where it just feels like you're grasping for anything that you can reach. And I think that when we talk about the classrooms, the fields, I think we should keep that in mind. What are we trying to accomplish here? What message, what story are we going to tell the community when we ask them to support this? And I don't want I want us to be totally open to any combination of projects that fit our priorities. We don't just say, what are our favorite things among that which is on the sheet in front of us, but what do we think this district needs? And what are we willing to advocate for to the public? There's a lot of plates up in the air. We're going to find out more about what we can afford. Hopefully by Wednesday at 6:30, prior to 6:45, 6:50 even, I'll take. I'm going to update the slides live. But when we get those answers, I think it'll be easier to prioritize this stuff. But I want us to be open to, like, we don't want to let the marketing lead the way, as Christian said before. But I don't think it's a cop-out at all to say, what story are we telling about where we are at this moment and where we want to take this district in the future with this project? Because ultimately, we are going to have to take this to the public, and we can't just say, trust me. And we've got to be able to convince them. And I just want to be sure we have that the projects reflect the priorities and that narrative.
So can I just add something to what Brendan said? My concern, obviously the marketing is one concern. And I think Brendan understands that better than anyone in this dais. But it's also the stress we're putting on Mr. Fink. Because there's a lot of things that go into preparation. It's not just a matter of putting it out there and having voting on it. There's a lot of preparations, calculations, or Triton, Tetra Tech that have to do the preparations to get these to a final state. And we're not there on some of these things even right now. And so the point about it, it's really the things that people don't see about the administration and the preparation work that is essential, and we have a certain amount of time that's not going to change between now and May. And that's where I think my emphasis would be, in addition to just what the community will be able to understand or not understand. And that's part of it, but there's even more concerns, I think, in doing this well, given the time that we have.
And I think, like you said earlier, Christian, that energy project can be done a year or 2 years from now more easily than a whole big capital project to be done. Okay, so Facilities Committee is meeting. You're going to get some more data, come back with a recommendation based on the proposition number 3, and we'll continue the discussion at our next meeting. Anyone want to stand and stretch?
Yeah, just thank you.
Oh.
I appreciate the support, the discussion. It's very good.
Thank you, John.
And I appreciate EPC clarity. We're good.
All our very detailed questions and having all the answers right away.
I will say on the EPC, if there are any things there that are ticking time bombs, we should move them into,
We did take a look at them.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Triton to review the ones that we did take a look at, because that might be potential project work that comes in. So there's a dozen, maybe total, across district-wide that we felt. They could be some big ticket numbers, so we'll see.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item up for discussion is continuing our discussion on alternate polling site. John sent the board a very detailed recap of, the options, the cost, et cetera. John, do you want to take it from here, or?
Sure, I can I can add a little color if
Okay,
that's
yeah,
okay.
great,
Yeah.
thanks.
So the question came up about adding an additional budget vote site. And we discussed this last year, so I did recycle some information. There's some changes from last year's information, so I provided a new update. So kind of the status quo is really where we stood last year, has a cost of roughly $17,000, a little over $17,000. And that's kind of the all-in costs. We moved this year to using an electronic sign-in process, so similar to when you go vote in general elections. You go and sign in. We were formerly using a poll book process. So we moved to electronic sign-in, number one, for a couple different reasons. We were looking at the data last year, so I wanted to be able to look at data a little bit easier. I built some money into the budget for this in order to do that. We can reduce a couple costs with personnel, but again, there's some initial upfront costs. So the May 26 option is what we're calling it. It looks like it's $47,800 for that cost, and that does include the cost if we have to do a second vote, right? So if our budget does get voted down, we have to have the ability, the financial power to go back and do a second vote, whether we're going out with the same tax levy, a lower tax levy, or a zero. And then if we are to add in another location, you're looking at $58,100. And that's just kind of like the basic costs and does not include costs for rental space. So that's assuming that we're assuming that role here in district, if there's a space here in district, and that our Wi-Fi can support it and all that. If we have to go outside the district, let's say, and I'm just for argument's sake, we're going to use a firehouse. Are they going to charge us for a rental fee for that? And then can their technology infrastructure support our sign-in process and the voting machine process? So we would want to know that all that information and what do we have to purchase there. So those are just some of the outliers there, and I added some just considerations in my update. And then I added some statistics, some data just about our budget vote history over the past 12 years, really, with a 10-year average. What was our adopted tax levy? What was our maximum allowable? What was our approval ratings? And how many votes did we get? So I think there is potential impact there if you do a second site, whether you're going to get more or less people, and what's your success rate. Thanks.
So can I just recap some of the costs after? I just add some follow-up questions. So as is, it's about 17,000. If we do it with the iPads and all of that, it's 47,000. But if we get everything passed on the first go round, it's about $28,000. And that technology is aidable, I learned. So we get back around 17,000. So that will cost us about 11,500 to use that if we don't need a second vote. But I understand we have to budget for it, but that would be the case. And then if we add a second location, that is going to add 10,000 plus a rental fee to that 11,000 after 8, even though that aidable money comes next year.
Correct.
I'm just kind of like bottom lining it.
Bottom line.
So bottom
That's right.
line, to add a second location when all the numbers have been balanced out, and if we don't have to do a second day vote, oh, bless you, we're maybe $26,000 to do a second day.
Sounds about right.
Second location, excuse me. Thank you. Okay. So I think at our last meeting, the board was in agreement, or not in agreement, but they were open to the idea of a second location, not to the idea of moving locations. I think that was the consensus. So I'll just open it up for discussion, comments, questions.
Can I just follow up on the numbers? How arriving at 26. So the I was following. But I appreciate that. So the 47,800 for the to go digital this year, you already factor that into the 25-26 budget. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, and that's including the backup, the second vote.
Correct.
And then to add the second site, so the 58 number was the 47 plus the $10,300 for the extra site. So my understanding, I was expecting you to end that discussion with the actual year-over-year cost to, well, not the year-over-year, that then the cost that we would have to add on top of what you've already budgeted to add a second location would be 10.3, not 26. I don't understand.
It would be about 10,300. Then you need, if you're doing it, that's assuming you're on site.
Right.
And my math was not playing the already budgeted numbers. I was just
Okay.
straight math. So the incremental cost, which is what we're deciding in terms of adding a second site, rough math, I was saying 15, the 10.3 plus a rental. I was overestimating.
So we said it was about 15 to rent it?
No. I'm sorry. I was saying it's 10.3 for a second site, and I just was overestimating if we went off site. Like, what's worst case? Maybe it would cost us $5,000. I have no idea. I was just hypothetical.
Got it. An event space you want to rent for
I don't know.
something on the water, maybe.
$500. I don't know how
Yeah,
much.
you know, it could range. Listen, you could get it for free, right? Who knows? Somebody could give it to us for free. I don't know.
I was worst case
approached
scenario
that, yeah.
planning to.
But,
Okay.
yes, but the conservative approach, I appreciate.
So the incremental cost to add a second site, which is what we were deciding, $13,000. Roughly is the estimate. Christian?
So I want to address a few points in John's memo. Obviously, the public hasn't necessarily seen the exact memo, so I'll try to describe them as well as kind of try to respond to them. I first want to address your third point about considering the impact on the outcome of the budget vote, candidates, things, and I just think we need to bracket that out and not even consider that. Because in the same way where we can't advocate for, we can only provide factual information, we're not allowed to influence the vote with the public money. You should never decide your election process or decision process by what you think might have a favor to one outcome or the other. And I think we really need to not consider that. That should not be a consideration at all. Because otherwise you would have politicians designing processes and democracies that would favor the incumbents over, let's say, challengers. And that's a very key part to the process. And I think we should not even talk about that, or that should not be a consideration. The second thing is there was an assertion that this would be a disruption to the high school, which is why we're considering other sites. And while I'm not advocating for this, and I'm not sure I accept that, although I will defer to building administrators, the Friday of that week is a school holiday. Some schools don't have it as a school holiday. If the logistics of having it during a school day are so difficult to accomplish, there's a very simple, no additional dollar way to do that, which is simply what we've done every single year for different reasons, which is to amend the school calendar and move the Friday to a Tuesday. I'm not advocating for that. What I'm saying is there's a very simple way to do it if you actually think about the merits of having a voting site at different places. And so the point about that doesn't cost anyone any additional money. The number of instructional days is the same, the contractual days for teachers is the same, and that is already on the schedule. And if we had a lot of school days, we'd be moving it anyway. I'll just leave it there as that. I think this is a soluble problem. I do have an issue, and last year I voted against adding the iPads to the voting process when that was in the discussion. And it's the reason why I voted against it, despite my positions for increasing access, improving the process, making it more fair, is that I don't see there's any value to the public for paying more for technology that doesn't necessarily is required. Because as I said last year, school board budget votes are not governed by election law in New York State, they're governed by education law. And there's a presumption of regularity, which means you do not need to have a perfect book. You do not need to show that. The burden of proof is on the challenger, not against, let's say, the entity. And what does that mean? When we take a vote, we do ayes, we raise hands. We could do it in a much more, formal way, which means we could do it like our town of Cornwall does it, and goes around the room and each of us casts a vote individually as we circle around the dais. We could get an electronic device where we manually and correctly record our vote. And there are times when the vote has been misrecorded. The point is that we don't need to do that because there's an assumption that it's a public process, it's visible. We can do raised hands, we can do a voice vote. And so I'm not sure what the value of where we won't have the cost of an additional voting site that would likely make the election fairer and more representative of the actual community. But we will spend that same amount of money to add technology, which I don't think has any value to the outcome of the vote or to the community. It just makes our lives easier. And whether it's aidable or not, it doesn't seem like that's worth it to me. So I don't know, and this was in the discussion, and the way that I said it last year is that, if I ask you for a Corolla and you quote me a Cadillac, well, the price is going to be higher. And I think the thing is there's nothing wrong with the poll book process, and I do have a concern about that. Because with the poll book, having a digital poll book allows us to analyze the data in a way that wouldn't allow people to see who voted, in a way that would make it a lot easier. And as someone who went through 2 poll books the analog way, that effort that I had to put in is what prevents a lot of other people who have the right to view that. And it would allow us to have this information assembled in a very easy way to search, and will allow that information to be manipulated, whether it's by local political parties, who then would see who are the most likely and dedicated voters, because that tends to be your core voters in any election, the ones who vote in a school board election. And I think there would be a potential for abuse that would not be worth the cost. So I would advocate not doing that. I think the analog way is sufficient. It serves a purpose. And I think overall that it's cheaper. And I think the value of having a second polling site is more valuable. And I just want to say that I've said a lot of words about this. And it's not because I think this is the most important thing in Cornwall Central School District. It's just that the things that I presented the last meeting were fairly obvious over a year and a half ago. Common sense. And then, you go and collect the data and you show that, yeah, it's pretty much what it is, that there is quite a bias in the school board, the budget elections about who actually shows up to vote. And, we have, but anyway, I'll leave it there. But I think the point is, what I would say is 2 voting sites. I think if there's 1 voting site, it really should be at the best voting site that's likely to have the fairest sampling of the district and reflects the community's intent and will, would be what we should aim for.
Other comments?
I think my only comment is what I said last time, whenever that was, is that it makes me nervous to move instead of adding an additional site when there's so much communication about this vote on the capital projects and everything going on. I fear that there would be a huge amount of people who don't come out to vote because they go to the wrong polling site, whatever. Not like we can't handle the communication, but I just think it's a lot of information, which I think is why a lot of us move towards, okay, if we're going to move the voting site, which I think is a good idea, let's still have it at the original site as well. And I still feel that way.
Thank you. Richard?
Just a question about what she brought up with the iPads or the technology. I know now we have early voting for general elections. Would that mean that if we had 2 sites, people could go to either or would they have to be assigned either the high school, let's say, or the middle school?
We would, the way we would set it up is that they go to either or.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to set them up that they would have to go to a designated location, we could do it that way. I don't know if we'd be able to do that this year at this point, because when you do your build goes in one way. So I think we built for 1 location. So if 1 location is just being split into 2, I think we're okay at this point.
Okay.
Follow up on that. They can go to either or if we have digital, because we'd be able to identify who voted instantly at each site. Now I'm actually racking my brain if I'm remembering town elections or board elections. We don't sign anyone in digitally. We mark them off in the physical book, right? Sign the book, yeah. So if we have, for argument's sake, if we were analog, then we would have to assign people to specific polling places. Is that right?
Correct.
So that's the advantage to having the digital.
I don't think that's the case, but I'm not a lawyer, and I don't think anyone else around this is on the education law, because you have to go. You can compare two voting books from two different sites. Remember, the presumption of regularity is that there's not a right into voting. It's not like it is carried out as an election. It is not an election. The original budget vote was like a corporate meeting or like a condo board meeting. We could have the vote by just have everyone gathering, do it Iowa caucus style in a large gym, and have a voice vote. There is no reason to actually record the individual votes. And that's why the concern for fraud, which is minuscule, as I said in the last time, is not a legal requirement. And if you look at some districts that have multiple sites, they collate it on a Google Sheets that they embed in their website, and you can have it in real time. And so the district where I work in Wappingers, which has 6 voting sites, and I'm there in Cornwall and seeing us count the vote, they have their 6 sites collated at least an hour before ours are out in real time, because that's what the requirement is. You could do it actually on a spreadsheet. There are other ways to do that, and that's why there's not a requirement to assign them to a district. If you're carrying out a regular town government state election, yes, you would have to assign people to a voting site because those are voted geographically. So if you go back to the original school budget votes where you had elementary schools, people would just gather at their local elementary school, and that's why you're allowed to do it that way, because that is actually what the original meeting was. It evolved into an election as a matter of efficiency, not as a matter of legal requirement. And so the point is, while there is a suggestion that you follow election law as kind of a model, there is not a legal requirement that you have to meet the same standard. In the same way as I was saying before, we can have a vote by a voice vote, or we can individually record the vote. We are not required to individually record the vote, and so we can carry out a vote that way. We don't need the technology to do that, or necessarily assigning people in a particular order.
So I hear what you're saying, that we don't have to do it a certain way, but I think the means of, public, my opinion at least, public trust and continuity, and also, what people are used to. I think people want to go in, cast their vote, have it count as a specific thing, and then there's little banter of, people voting more than once, or so I understand it's not necessarily a requirement, but I would advocate that we follow the election process. So I think what we're really need to decide is, now sounds like it's twofold, because one, Christian's raised the issue of, do we stay analog or go digital? And then 2, do we pursue a second location for voting?
I can just ask a question. Because the digital move was in the budget last year, was that already decided, or was that just something that you budgeted for just in case?
I budgeted for it, and I've set up what we can do analog. Nothing prevents us from going poll books.
Curious. Sorry. What are the advantages of going digital besides the fact that we can say, we know, I don't think there's going to be voter fraud during the school board election, but so we can say this was all legit, and this is, besides that, what are the benefits of going digital?
It's just a streamlined approach. We generally hire about 13 people to sign people in on poll books. So what we narrow that down is really 5 or 6 people on that, and then they'd sign in through the iPad approach. You can still print out who voted. You can look at their location. You can disaggregate the data very easily. You can have live real-time statistics, so I can look at that. How many people are voting per hour. Break all that out.
And if we had 2 sites, we have to hire workers for both sites. So digital would be less at each site, analog presumably be more. Not the whole number perhaps, because now we're going to split people theoretically.
Yeah, you'd still want, you know, X amount of poll workers there with the books versus less for iPads. Those are what the numbers are based on. So we weighed how many people we're going to need if we were to use digital.
Other comments, questions?
Do we want to go around like we did with the
Yeah.
fields, maybe?
Jamie, can we start with you this time? What are your thoughts related to polling location and digital versus analog?
It seems like since we already budgeted for going digital, and that's, I don't know, I hate to say like the way the world's going, but it like makes sense. Like, why not get more information and be able to have that data year over year? So I say yes, and I think that 2 polling sites make sense.
As I did last year, I support 2 voting sites, but if we decide on 1 voting site, I have a clear preference about what I think is the better of the one.
I agree with Jamie. I think the digital makes sense for a number of reasons, and with the incremental cost of only $10,000 for the additional site, I would be in favor of that. I am curious to hear where it would be, though, because I am not as enthusiastic about the site if we have to explain to people where it is. You know, if it's like in a place that no one's ever heard of, or like a lot of people haven't heard of. So I know we want to build this progressively and make decisions and then figure out the how it's done. But yeah, I give my conditional approval on finding a place that actually works, and that is within a reasonable cost.
Yeah, I'm for the 2 polling sites, analog versus digital. My priority is the 2 sites. So if cost was an issue, I would say don't do the iPads. But either way is fine with me.
Either way, meaning digital or analog, is okay.
I am in for the 2 sites. I'd like to see the 2 sites, and I'm also with the analog.
Jim?
I remain unconvinced that we need a second site, so I would say keep it at the middle school and keep it with paper book and roll like we have been, but apparently that's not going to happen, so there you go.
Lofton?
I think I'm pretty close to what Richard said in that my priority is that there be 2 sites, and that, if cost is an issue, that I don't think we need to go digital, but if we decide that we want to do that, I'm fine with that as well, but priority being the 2 sites.
And I'll just add that I like the idea of 2 sites. I will say, as someone who lives on the other side, I kind of always knew where I was going to have to go for things, at certain points. But I am in favor of it because I would really like to see the data in terms of, what impact it has on turnout and, the entire community having a voice. So I'm in favor of it as a test. And of course, if the cost is minimal, there's no harm in doing it. And then I do like the idea of digital, giving us real-time data. And I heard your concerns, Christian, but I like the idea of real-time data, quick answers, etc. I understand other districts can do that. I think it might take us a little while to get there with everything else we have going on our plate, to adapt those kind of changes. But so I guess the next step from here is to put resolution on the agenda the next meeting. And it looks like 2 sites.
Wouldn't we need to, in order to create a resolution with any teeth, wouldn't we have to name the second site though? Would it be, I mean,
I don't know if you have to commit to having 2 sites.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I guess that's up to the board.
wouldn't we have to name what the second site is? If you're just writing the resolution, wouldn't you have to, there would come a point where you'd have to say what that is, not,
We'd have to bring up exactly.
we'd have to figure out where it's gonna
we
be,
want it.
yeah.
Okay, and so one of the things I'd like to bring up is that we have the second one at the high school.
So can I just about the requirement, I think the only thing we would need to do is update the budget calendar, which is where we name the location of the sites. As you remember, back in December, I had mentioned leaving that blank or undecided until this was settled. Right now, it says the middle school. I think if we just would amend that, that is the only thing we need to do. I don't know if there's a time frame where we need to name that, as far as before the election. I don't think there's a logistics about naming it and communicating that information, and then there's the what I think the legal requirement about designating it is. I don't think we're close to either one of those. So my point about it is that if the resolution is for 2 sites, I think we can do that, and then also amend the budget calendar. I will just say this, and I think it's pretty clear I've been one of the more advocates for this. I don't think the more time we spend on this is going to make it better. As I've said, we have a lot of things on our plate that are substantively more important. And I think the point is that at this point we should, have a tendency toward the most direct way forward if this is what we're deciding, and not spend a lot of time putting angels on the head of a pin about exactly what the best site is and all those types of issues, because it is now displacing some other concerns, and that's why it was brought up as early as it was the past 2 years, so that it would not bleed into the budget process.
Okay,
So Christine, basically what we're at with, he's basically saying, no, let's not pick a place right now, right?
Right.
And so I'm going the opposite way, being that you're going to be writing this up for the next board meeting, is that the second site be the high school?
I know the next board meeting, though, I don't know that we can commit to one or the other, because we have to look
Okay.
at what the impact that would be on the building itself, on the flow of traffic, of people, of parking. So I think we just have to assess, is that truly the best site? Or is there an alternative that would have, less impact and would be, just an easier flow, et cetera? So I just don't know that we'll have that information. I don't think it's a fair expectation to have that wrapped up by our next meeting. But I do think we should, and I don't know if we have to have a vote on it, but I think we should have a vote that, okay, we're going to pursue a second location that is TBD based on, or maybe we don't have to have a vote. Maybe that's the direction we're going and it doesn't have to be, okay, so we do that
I think
and
the
then
next
we wait.
move
Okay.
is what Christian described. We just amend that vote that we took back in December, but that would, at that point, we have to be amending it with an actual location.
Okay, so then we can talk about location and.
I think we would just get a little bit of legal guidance on it. Christian is right. There's certain notifications regarding the budget that we have to put out and where the budget vote is going to take place. Whether that has to happen now or not, I'm not sure. So
Okay.
I would like legal guidance just about adding the second location and the notification of it at this point. There will be certain notifications that we have to send out through the budget
Right.
process that we do through the traditional
And
methods.
the capital
So-
project resolution.
Correct.
And I think
All of
it's
that.
probably the same date as those.
Okay.
All those dates will line up. Yeah.
So at our next meeting, maybe we can just find out what legal said and we'll take it from there.
Yeah,
Is
and then I think we have to explore what that location is, what the best location is.
Is that, we good? Okay, all right, I just want to make sure, I don't know who's, okay, great, thank you. All right, now we are on to our second recognition of visitors, public comments. You can step up to the microphone, the same guidelines exist as earlier. We just ask you to state your name and comment.
My name is Greg Roby, Mineral Springs Road. This is my first board meeting in 25 years.
Welcome.
I can tell you that nothing has changed. The aid is still 57%, 58%, and I have a copy of what the Orange County Board of Election gave the district, when it went from having a separate voter registration to using that. And interestingly enough, they screwed it up. So you ended up having people who were not in the district being able to vote in the district because at least that first year was wrong. So and this will go to what you were saying. I think because of where you are, where you're talking about the cost versus story, that the simpler you can keep it this year, the better you're going to be. I was the facilitator of the 21st Century Committee for the school district. This is the one that came up with a school where by NEMA. The community turned it down. We had about a 30 or 40% higher vote turnout, but we still went down by about 1,000 people. Now, I don't think the community is the same one it was at that time, but you have to control the narrative and say why the current facilities are not serving the educational needs of this district. The people who vote for the school district have ears for that, and it will be co-opted, become about money if you don't. And it's not easy. We failed, the committee that I was in, and we came to consensus, 21 people. And on that committee were people who had fought themselves in the Cornwall local, letters to the editor, to the ground. And we came together. So the community can do it. And it has changed. So some of my knowledge is old. The other thing I've heard, and this is for the facilities committee, at the time of the 21st Century Committee, part of it was looking at student population by grade level. This school at that time housed 1,000 elementary school students, where the private school in the village had 350. And Willow, I think, was at 450, and the high school at 1,200. There are optimum sizes, and I do not know if the board has considered how to move towards making this school smaller. And if you're going to put 8 more classes in it, you're doing exactly the wrong thing in terms of making this a student-friendly environment. And I was shocked, but not shocked about the gun threat that was reported on by another person. The middle school is too big. Kids get lost in it. And we're stuck with the facilities we have. But we should, I think, always look at ways of getting the ratio of students in a building to be optimum for the psychological development of the children. Too late for this one unless the vote goes down, and then you're back to the drawing table. But at the time that I ended my service and the second committee came up with what now is the high school campus, we could have closed Willow Avenue, Cornwall-on-Hudson, and built a new elementary school at 0 cost because the energy cost was enough to pay for the bond. Now, one last thing, as you're marketing this thing, the 9W site was 95% aidable, to the best of my knowledge, and the West Cornwall site was 80% aidable when it finally all came out. If the community, and I'm willing to help because I was the facilitator, if they could learn that being grumpy and voting no because they have their various private reasons cost them 2 high schools. Because this goes into that aid thing. It's crazy. But it needs to be explained because we paid for 2 high schools because we were obstinate Cornwallites. And I don't know that that's changed. So thank you for the time. Thank you for your service. Wonderful to hear the discussion. And as I said, I feel like I didn't miss anything. It was a repeat.
Sir, could you repeat your name?
Yes, Greg Roby.
Groby, Groby.
Yeah. The other thing,
Oh.
which I've talked with your interim superintendent and John, there's stuff that you need to be aware of that the town's doing, and it can have serious impacts on our budget. I don't know where it is because, of course, it's all executive session kind of stuff. But if you're not in the loop and up on that, that's the other thing. Because we're going to have the extra taxes for the next few years at the town level, that's another headwind that the district's going to have to, this. So,
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay. So we have board closing comments, but I will remind everyone that we have to go back into executive session. So, but we'll start with Lofton. You good? Jim?
Pass.
I'll be brief. To quote the Roman writer Seneca, and maybe this is a thought in relation to the capital project, happiness consists of two things. First, having what's essential, and number two, knowing what is enough.
Okay. I thank you everyone for your energy. We've been meeting since 5:30 today, so I would need a motion to go into executive session to continue discussion about personnel issues. Brendan, thank you. May I have a second? Lofton, thank you. All in favor? Okay. For the sake of everyone here, we're going to come back and we have no more business to discuss, so we'll just be coming back to close the meeting at that point. But thank you.